Hi, everyone. We're excited to be involved with you this evening. I'm really excited to be sharing about the different assistive technologies that schools can use and that individuals can use in their different scenarios. And tonight, we're going to welcome Fadziso Fisher. Good evening, Fadziso.
Hi, Karen.
It's
Thank
really
you for
exciting.
inviting me.
I'm excited to be learning from you tonight. And since our topic is looking at hearing impairments, I'm excited to see how we can actually help people who are really struggling with perhaps their hearing, whether it's in the classroom or out of the classroom. So if we look at what legislation has said, it said that from 2012, children should mandatorily have hearing tests at schools. And we know that that's not always the case. And so what are the kinds of tips we could give parents to look out for in terms of their children to pick up perhaps a hearing problem?
Well, the first and most obvious one is if you're calling your child repeatedly and they're not responding, or they're not responding the way you'd expect them to loud noises or just sounds in their environment. And also look at their speech development, because your speech development is very closely tied in with your hearing. We speak what we hear. So if you're noticing that your child has a bit of a delay with speaking, then you might want to consider investigating their hearing further.
And if you want to start sharing, what are the kinds of things that you think people should begin with in terms of technologies?
Well, this depends on the context. There's such a broad range of technology when it comes to hearing. So ideally, the pathway you would follow is firstly to consult with an audiologist, and the audiologist will advise you about what to do in terms of hearing aids. And in 2020, there's such a wide variety of hearing aids, and they all come with different complex technologies built into them, like Bluetooth, which can then be connected to a phone and used in that way. So it really depends on the context, and I'm happy to go into more detail with specific cases of where you'd choose different technologies, because it really depends whether you're in the classroom or outside, whether you need something quite simple or something a bit more complex.
And so what would you recommend parents do? Do they go straight to an audiologist, or is there something else that they should be doing?
First prize is go to an audiologist. Many wonderful audiologists who will get you started on the journey. Just because, for example, if you go and get a hearing amplifier before you see an audiologist, you might find that you actually cause more damage to your hearing, because children tend to want to keep increasing the volume, and that might cause increased damage. Whereas if you go to an audiologist first, they can advise on an appropriate system which won't cause damage.
Oh, wow. That's really, really interesting. In terms of technologies, would you like to start sharing? Where would you like to begin?
Well, I'd like to begin in the classroom, because I think this is where we find a lot of cases of hearing loss. I was looking at some stats earlier, and I think it's 1.2 million children in sub-Saharan Africa in the school-going age have a moderate to severe hearing loss, and they definitely land up in classrooms. And I would add that it's not just hearing loss that you see in the classroom. You also notice what's called auditory processing disorder. And typically with that, the physical mechanisms involved in hearing are intact, but the brain is struggling to process sounds at different levels.
Okay.
So that can be quite an issue. So when it comes to solutions in the classroom, I'm just going to share my screen. You do get different options as far as solutions, and you get options that accommodate either for individuals or for groups.
Okay.
Okay, so when it comes to individuals, I'm actually going to start with the group one. So we've got here solutions for groups. So we have what are called loop systems. Loop systems have been around for decades, and a loop system is quite a complex system which involves connecting a coil around the room, and the coil connects to an amplifier. So the amplifier would have a microphone attached to it. And what happens is, as the teacher speaks through the microphone, the sound goes through this loop which is around the room and goes directly to the hearing aid of the learner who's wearing a hearing aid with what's called a telecoil. Now, the challenge there is that the hearing aid, first of all, has to have a telecoil. And of course, the learner has to be wearing a hearing aid. So if the learner is wearing a hearing aid with a telecoil, it's quite simple. They just switch on the button that says T, and they immediately pick up the sound. It bypasses all the background noise, and the teacher's voice goes directly to the hearing aid, which is quite great. But if the learner doesn't have a hearing aid, then we need to provide what's called a loop receiver. So that's a picture of a loop receiver there, that funny device with the earphones connected to it. And the loop receiver in this case behaves as a hearing aid with a telecoil. So the receiver itself has a telecoil built into it, and then the learner would wear it with earphones or headphones, switch on the T, and then they can also benefit from a loop system. The benefit of the loop system, of course, is that it catches a bunch of people at the same time. So you just walk into the room, use your device, and you immediately benefit from it. So different systems work for different room sizes. So typically the installation of them is quite a process, but definitely worthwhile once they are installed. The other thing I'd look at for a group of learners, it's what's called a sound field system. And in the picture there, I've put up the Roger sound field. And it looks like a typical speaker. And then there's a little microphone there, which the teacher would wear around their neck. Now, the Roger sound field system is quite special in that, and unlike a regular speaker, which stays at kind of a static level in terms of volume, the Roger is dynamic. So as the noise levels in the classroom increase, the sound of the Roger also increases, amplifies the teacher's voice automatically. But it happens in a very subtle way. So it doesn't have that awful booming noise that you get from typical speakers. So it very naturally increases the teacher's voice so that the teacher's voice is always a little bit louder than the classroom. And that's quite important for all children, not just children who've been diagnosed with hearing loss, but children who have auditory processing difficulties. And just from a developmental perspective, children in general struggle with processing sound, because it's a skill that's developed over time. So it benefits all the children in the classroom, and it's not specifically for children with hearing loss. It assists them, but it assists the entire classroom additionally. And it can connect to hearing aids. Yeah.
That's really fantastic. We've got a question from Chelsea. She's saying, does this compare with the MFI hearing aid that connects to your iPhone? Do you know?
I'm not an audiologist, so I'm not familiar with every brand of hearing aid there is. I'm a speech therapist specializing in assistive technology. But let me put a tab on that question, and I will get back to Candice.
Thank you. Thanks so much. You can carry on. Sorry.
Sure, no problem. So in terms of accommodating for a group, I would say that these are the major ways that you can do it. And now I'm going to move on to the individual solutions. So that's the next slide. Okay. So when it comes to accommodating for an individual in a classroom who has hearing loss, then we look at your one-to-one systems, as I like to call them. And a typical one you'd encounter is an FM system, like what looks like a walkie-talkie here. So the teacher wears, yeah. So with an FM system, the learner who has hearing loss would have a receiver, and the teacher wears a transmitter. So the transmitter has a small microphone, and that sound is sent via a signal directly to the learner's receiver, and the learner can then wear headphones. The headphones I've put in the picture here are the Clevy HearSafe headphones. I specifically recommend those because they've got an 85 decibel limit. So they typically don't, once you hit 85 decibels, you can't go any higher, which is great for learners because, as I mentioned earlier, they always want to increase the volume a little bit more. So it just keeps them safe in that respect. So they can plug their headphones into the FM receiver, and then the teacher's voice bypasses all the background noise and goes straight to the learner's ears. So that's an efficient one-to-one system. We also get devices like the Wear. So the Wear is different in that it's not like a walkie-talkie in the sense that there's a transmitter and a receiver. Instead, it works as a receiver on its own. So it would be clipped onto a shirt, and then it amplifies the sound within a region around the learner, so about 1 meter, a 1 meter radius. So as the learner is moving around, chatting to their friends, the Wear would gently amplify the sounds within that radius, which is great for more dynamic communication settings. As we know, I mean, the classroom is more than just the teacher talking. There are other students talking. So it could really help a learner to participate more actively in discussions as well.
That's really useful. Would you use any of these in a home context, or would they only be in school?
No, you can absolutely use them at home. So if we just go back to the loop systems, you do get loop systems which are actually portable and can be installed in a living room setting and connected to the television so that the sound transmits directly to your hearing aid. And a device like the Wear can definitely be used in the home environment as well.
Oh, thank you. You want to share the next device?
Yeah. So I'm glad that you brought up the home because that's what I want to move on to now. So just in terms of daily living, safety and time management are some considerations one does need to make. Obviously, when you have most of our signals are auditory. You know, you wake up to an alarm, you hear an alarm go off, and you know there's a fire in the building. Now, for someone with hearing loss, that can put them in danger, or even just really have an impact on their daily living because they can't hear, these signals. So it's important to provide a way to alert individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing to events happening in their environment. And that's where your alert systems come into play. So this is just an example of some of the alert systems. There's many, many different brands, but typically they're made up of some kind of main receiver unit. I like to call it the brain. So in this particular case, this is the brain. So everything connects to the brain. So you put up your transmitters around the house. It could be a doorbell transmitter. It could be a fire alarm. It could even just be a little pocket transmitter somewhere in the house connected to your landline. And then it sends a signal when there's an event to the main unit, which is the brain. And then the main unit will alert the individual either through sending another signal to a unit which will light up. So you get these units which can produce a very bright light, or you can get units which make very loud noises at with different tones. So if you hear high-pitched noises better, you can choose a high-pitched tone or low-pitched depending on your hearing levels. And then you can also attach a vibrating cushion to it. This is an example of a vibrating cushion. This one's quite special.
Just hang on a minute. They can't see that. Wait a minute.
Okay.
Wait a minute.
Sure.
Okay, you want to show them?
Yeah. So this one here is actually this is a vibrating alarm clock. So it's an alarm clock completely, but when you set it off, it shakes quite aggressively. So it's suitable for waking individuals up. And this one connects via Bluetooth to the phone. So you set your alarm as normal on an app on your phone. And when that alarm goes off, this unit vibrates. Okay.
And then in terms of that unit, can it also work for, say, for example, the alarms you spoke about? So a smoke alarm or other alarms, could it be linked to that as well?
So typically when you, if you just go back to the slide, when you buy an alert system, it comes as a full set, and you have to have the main unit. And the main unit comes with a vibrating cushion, which is plugged in. So if any of the alarms go off, then the vibrating cushion will also be activated. So you can pop that under your pillow. Yeah.
Okay. I was going to ask, so do you put that under the pillow? Okay, cool.
Yeah, typically, yeah. So that's one example of an alert system. This is another simpler one, but basically the same idea. A brain or main unit which receives signals for different events taking place. Even there's also like baby alerts. So these are quite special, a lot of them, because they allow you to adjust the sensitivity of the receiver. So you can make it really, really sensitive. So, you pick up on the tiniest, cry. Or you can make it a little bit less sensitive. So those are quite important for deaf individuals who have a baby in the house. And it works exactly the same way, sends the signal to the main unit, and the vibrating cushion goes off. Okay. So that's with your alert system. Yeah.
That would put deaf mothers and fathers really at ease if you've got resources like that can assist you.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's so important that everyone has access to these things.
That's true. Okay. The next exciting thing. Yeah.
So still on, daily living, we also look at telephones. So there are special phones which have been made to be amplified to much higher volumes than a traditional phone to assist individuals who need that assistance. So that's just one example, and they come in many different shapes and sizes with many different bells and whistles. For example, typically they'll have a telecoil functionality, which means if your hearing aid has a telecoil, then you can connect your alarm, your phone directly to your hearing aid when you answer it, which is great because it transmits it directly. You also get ones with Bluetooth. So if you have a Bluetooth receiver, then you can use some of these phones, amplified phones, with your receiver as well. And then you get your cordless ones, and just the same range of phones that you'd find in any other telephone. And you can also plug in what are called ear hooks. So here's a picture of, your ear hooks. And what these do is that they hook just behind your ear, just behind the hearing aid, and they transmit sounds directly to your hearing aid. So these are quite nice to have. I know a lot of people like buying ear hooks because you can plug them into any device, and the sound will be transmitted directly to your hearing aid. And similar concept is the amplified TV headset. So with that particular device, you'd connect one part of it to the television, and then you actually put on the receiver, and then this transmitter, which is connected to the television, would pick up on the sound and then send it to your receiver, where you are on your couch, and you can enjoy the television at a louder volume.
So Fadziso, we've got people from iSchool Africa, and Chelsea's also talking about comparing it to the features on an Apple device. So these devices that you're showing, are they compatible with any type of phone, or are they only compatible with the hardware that you are showing? Can they work with mobile phones as well? Do you know?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, they do work with most phones. It also depends on the software. I know recently a client came in with an Apple, and I think there is a new setting on Apple which might conflict with ear hooks in particular. But for all the devices, as far as I've experimented with them, they all work with any phone, Android or Apple.
Oh, cool. Okay, cool. So Chelsea and the iSchool person, I don't know if it's you, Mish, but that would be a good comparison in terms of that the devices work. And let's see if we can get some comparison in terms of pricing and the usage of different apps on different phones. So that's cool. Thanks.
It's a pleasure. Okay, so that covers, I'm just going to stop sharing. Okay. Okay.
So Fadia, if you are like a mother at home or a father at home and you're not sure sort of what device to even consider for home, are there things that you should consider more than others when you're looking at getting devices, particularly for in a home?
So I would ask myself, I mean, first of all, what is the main reason you want it? What is the main functionality? And also a big question is, will it improve your quality of life? And I think that is the most important question. And if the answer to that is yes, then definitely that's a good starting point to looking for a device. A simple change can make a huge difference.
And then if we're looking at a school, and if a school knows that there's perhaps an individual or two that needs it, would teachers need special training around that? And do you offer that?
We do. So if schools feel they need a device, they're welcome to call us, and we'll come over and have a discussion and a needs analysis around what they require. And then in addition to, providing the device, we do provide pretty extensive training and support. So we'll never just dump a device and expect you to figure it out. We will literally hold your hand through the whole process.
And if you had to now compare, sort of, we've spoken about children, if we talk about older people, are these kinds of devices also useful for perhaps people in retirement villages or older members of family? So what would the difference or the advice be there?
So they are extremely useful for that population. And it's one group that I actually get a lot of requests from. I find that in particular, amplified phones tend to be quite popular with the more elderly generation, and it's just provides a way to keep in touch with family and friends where they've battled before. And the advice I would give there is really to, again, look at what would improve the individual's quality of life. Do they want to be able to communicate with their friends better? Then an amplified phone might be an option. Alert systems would also be an important consideration as you get to that stage. So just a way to keep aware of what's happening in your environment is extremely important.
And even I was thinking the one with the television and an older person that they can listen to the television, and perhaps if they're living in a home environment with other people, that they can still hear and the noises don't distract them. So thank you. Exactly. That's really, really useful.
No, absolutely.
So if we then look at a school space, like a conventional classroom type thing, what are the kinds of tips you would give to teachers in terms of identifying perhaps children that have got hearing loss? So often in the foundation phase, teachers are more aware and pick it up, but sometimes children slip through the loop. What could we say to teachers to look out for in terms of behavior or attributes that you might see that you might recommend or suggest that the child goes for a hearing test?
That's a really good question. I would say teachers should look out for learners who aren't quite engaging in especially verbal activities in the class. So if there's a few group discussions and there's one particular learner who seems a bit left out during those times, also look for learners who seem to struggle to follow instructions, specifically verbal instructions, because that can be a huge indicator that they're struggling to get that auditory input. I think those are key.
I definitely agree with you. And I suppose that's where, as a teacher, where we become really observant of our children and take note that becomes crucial. And I suppose in some ways, language teachers might notice it more, where they perhaps have more oral type kind of engagements with their students than perhaps some of the other subjects do. If we think of the technologies that you've shown, what kind of technology do you think would really benefit is there a difference for a younger child to an older child? Would you recommend some of those technologies more for sort of a foundation phase type classroom and others for an older child? Are there those types of things that should be considered?
They definitely are. When you consider that, your younger learners tend to be a bit more wriggly and might be less tolerant of having to wear, headphones and a receiver. You might want to look at something like the Rogers system, which I showed earlier. So that speaker, which gently amplifies the noise and still allows for that dynamic movement within the classroom.
That's a really
versus
good,
an FM system.
Yeah, that's a really good tip in terms of that. Do you have any tips then for parents in terms of perhaps other children who might make nasty comments or perhaps some bullying ideas? Do you have suggestions that you might give to a parent or a teacher to help parents cope in that kind of situation?
So that is a difficult one. But I think just as you would deal with bullying in any situation, I think giving the child, reassuring the child that their worth is beyond their ability to hear or not to hear is really, really important. And I think providing a supportive community, if there are other parents who are experiencing similar things with children who also have hearing loss, I think it's so important to find that strength in community.
I agree. What came to my mind is I had a daughter with a cleft lip, and often the children, when she was little, made comments. And what I found really worked was where you went in and you explained the situation and you actually told the children what it was about, that bullying seemed to disappear. And I would suggest something similar would happen for children who have to wear hearing devices. If the children are actually shown how it's worked and why the child needs to wear it and how it functions, and perhaps even empowering some of the children in the class to help with how to set it up, or if you're using a system in the class that other children know how to help that child so that they can hear the teacher better. All that kind of communication, I think, really helps within a teaching space, that the more honesty and the more openness we share around these things, I think it removes those barriers, because now it's not seen as something different, but it's just part of what's in our classroom, and then we support each other more within that space. I think often we forget to have those kinds of discussions, or a new child arrives at the school and you forget to tell them about the child and engage with them about a similar kind of discussion. And I think it's having the discussion that often really helps within that space.
Yeah, absolutely. I really love that. And I think it goes in line with just highlighting that at the end of the day, all of us, every child has a different learning style. So children with hearing loss might need a more visual learning style, and children who are blind might need a more auditory learning style, and everything in between. And I think it's so important for teachers and parents to educate little ones about just the differences that are out there amongst their friends, and just to also identify, what makes me special, what's different. Oh, I maybe like to jump around a lot when I learn. I love that, Karen.
Yeah, I mean, if I think of the wonderful tools that you've shown this evening, are there any other features or things that you think you'd like to share with parents as we start ending off?
So in terms of technologies, I have covered every category of technology, which is there. Well, at the moment, if I continued, we'd be here until midnight. But I think just, reiterating how, it's important to just understand how each individual child wants to learn, and to realize that, different devices work differently depending on the child. So, an FM system might seem brilliant for one child, but isn't well tolerated by another one. So it is a process of trial and error to an extent.
If somebody wanted to get hold of you, how would they get hold of you to either pop into their school or to ask you to come and speak to parents? How would they communicate with you?
Well, they could either email me on Fadziso@editmicro.coza, or they can WhatsApp me. I'm always happy to get WhatsApps and phone calls.
So we'll share the Edit Micro details with everybody as well. And then when you phone through to Edit Microsystems, you can just ask to speak to Fadziso, and she will answer your questions and help you with your queries. I want to ask a question in terms of your studies and what you and why you would recommend other, perhaps young women, maybe some young men might want to study speech therapy. Why do you think you would promote it?
So the reason I studied speech therapy was because I love helping people. So it's something it's a very deep calling inside me. So if you are someone who loves helping people and also really getting to know people on a deeper level. I love doctors, but I find that being a speech therapist allows me to walk a journey with my patients, which I don't think my medical doctor friends don't really get to experience. So you really get to walk lifelong journeys with people, and sometimes from the time they're very young. And I think that's something that the profession does afford you. So, and also we do need a lot more research into just languages in South Africa, because it is quite a young profession in the country. You find that a lot of resources are available in English, but we want to see more resources and, the array of languages available in South Africa, and to be so cool to see more people studying for that reason.
And what do you have to study?
The degree is a Bachelor of Science in Speech Language Pathology if you're at UCT. So it depends on which university you go to, but it is a 4-year program and you're ready to work after that.
So that's really cool. So you've landed up at Edit Microsystems. What are the options that people have with this qualification?
So you can work in a school, in the education department. You can work in hospitals. You can work in a private practice. You can also work in assistive technology, as I'm currently doing. So there's so many options, and those are just the ones at the top of my head. You can go into research and academia. So it really depends on your area of interest. There's so many different areas in speech therapy. Assistive technology and augmentative and alternative communication are just one stream, but you could go into early intervention, you could go into stuttering. There's just so many streams. So there's a unique path for everyone.
Oh, wow. That's really interesting that it's so really wide.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of looking at studies and going into these kinds of fields, did you have to do particular subjects at school to be accepted?
Well, I remember they asked, sorry, it was so long ago when I filled in my application. So I can't remember what they asked for, but I think biology and or physical science were definitely on the list. I think maths or maths literacy, it would help to have English and another language as well. You err on the side of having your sciences, but don't be dismayed if you don't manage, still apply. I think there aren't enough people applying for the program. So I think you just take a chance, even if you don't have biology and physical science and maths.
Oh, thank you. That's wonderful. I think so often we don't know about professions, or we're not sure, or we're too scared even to apply. So I think the more we can say to people, just give it a bash if you're interested in something like that, and see what happens. So just as an ending note, is there some thought that you'd like to leave with the audience in terms of hearing impairments and technologies that can assist them?
I think it's one thing that's kind of stuck with me in my journey as an assistive tech specialist is that the impairment isn't the barrier. It's actually society that creates barriers, and technology is just such a powerful tool to, you know, remove some of those barriers. So I say, if you can, embrace technology, and yeah, I think that's that's my takeaway.
Yeah, definitely. So use the technology to your advantage so that you can really integrate into society so that you don't feel isolated. And as you said just now, build a community around you that supports you, I think is really important. So how do we actually support each other when there are difficult situations that arise? So Fadzi, thank you so much for this evening and for sharing your wonderful knowledge and thoughts with us. I love technology, so I loved learning about this new technology tonight. That was really incredible. So thank you very much. To all of you who were watching, we thank you for your time and have a good evening. Goodbye.
Have a good evening, everyone. Bye.